This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. My guest today is Bruce Apon. Bruce is the founder of Ocean Protocol. Ocean Protocol helps developers build marketplaces and other apps to privately and securely publish, exchange, and consume data. Yes, Ocean Protocol is building the new data economy. Welcome to the show, Bruce.
Hi, happy to be here.
To begin with, Bruce, why don't we get some personal background on yourself? So maybe just introduce yourself. Love to hear a little bit about where you're from, your career path, what you were doing before crypto, and your entry point into blockchain.
Sure. I've been in crypto since 2013. We started out being one of the very first, blockchain startups that was VC funded. Before that, I had spent well over a decade building banks around the world, in Eastern Europe, in Southeast Asia, as well as in Central Europe, like Germany, Belgium, these types of places. And I had always been interested in seeing how the financial system was developing around the world and being a part of that by bringing banking services, bread and butter stuff, loans, stuff that normal consumers could have. But I had also seen that this tool, the financial system, wasn't necessarily accessible to everybody. You needed to have a certain amount of credit history, honest people who were able to pay back loans and such like that weren't able to get loans because of the current system and the way that we rate people based on how much credit they take. And so when blockchain came up, it intrigued me because I realized that with blockchain, you could actually use the tools of blockchain for provenance, history, and all that sort of stuff to get to track the behavior of people in a way that builds up, and not only in financially, but their intellectual property, their identity, their reputation, and all these things. And I had a sense, even in 2013, along with my co-founders, that blockchain would enable and open up this type of angle. And that's why I sold my company that I was working on, and I jumped 100% into blockchain in 2013.
Fantastic. And then I guess it'd be good to also understand just a little bit of the origin story of Ocean Protocol. And so I guess there was probably a few years in between 2013 and the founding of Ocean Protocol. But so, yeah, maybe just let's have the high level overview of the Ocean Protocol origin story. And at the same time, maybe just, tell us what your kind of motivations there are and probably what Ocean Protocol is. I mean, I understand the idea is to be a decentralized data exchange and connect data providers and consumers and build this data economy. And we'll get into all this as we go. But origin story, Bruce.
Sure. Ocean Protocol wasn't the first idea we started with. It was the third idea, actually fourth. Sure. We had gone and started in with something called Ascribe, which was putting intellectual property on the blockchain, and it was the Bitcoin blockchain. So it was the original NFTs on Bitcoin, which we all know now it doesn't work. Bitcoin blockchain isn't good for holding NFTs, nor is it intended to. We realized this about a year in, and then we said, well, this isn't going to work at this stage. Nobody understood this. We were on Madison Avenue in New York and explaining blockchain in 2013, 2014. It just wasn't going to go. It was very clear. And so by about 2015, we realized this, and we started thinking, what is the main problem that we're facing with Ascribe? And that was that there was no decentralized metadata store. So this is similar to things like Filecoin, storage, SIA. There's a whole bunch of kind of storage types that aren't decentralized. And at that time, we had thought a decentralized database was a good idea. So we actually started building BigchainDB, which was complementary to Filecoin storage and all the other ones. As we worked on that, we got reasonable traction. We worked with about 50 different companies on proof of concepts in so many different industries, from automotive to supply chain, healthcare, government, financial. So we actually got, through BigchainDB, a complete overview of the world's kind of economic system and how things are made and created and sold. And that was really interesting. With BigchainDB, we worked on that for about 2 years, and we tried to think, what is the logical endpoint of what we're doing? And it all came down to people were trying to share data so that everybody had a source of truth in real time. But we also realized that if you have this source of truth in real time, you could mine that data for insights. And the industry that was growing the fastest from the phase of, let's say, 2015 until 2020 was AI. It's something that most people are not aware of. And we realized that big data and blockchain was what we had been working on. But the actual consumer who's going to just devour all of this is going to be AI. And so we said, well, how do we do this? And right around then, there was the ICO craze, etc. We knew BigchainDB could continue on its path, but we also saw that for us to do something even bigger than BigchainDB, we needed to do a token launch. And that was kind of the origin story of, or the origin point of Ocean Protocol. We figured that this was the original vision of Ascribe. It's giving people power in a data economy. It's giving them kind of ownership of their data, but also allowing for consumption, allowing for AI researchers to potentially mine it, but using financial means to have the signal on the price. And that's fundamentally it. It's giving people back control of their data, but also giving them the tools to monetize it if they want to, but also having the people at the very end who start understanding this is where I can get data, but I have to pay for it. So that is the vision of Ocean. And we think that that is a very powerful idea once we can get it out to the entire world.
Fantastic. Yes, I tend to agree. It is a very powerful idea. And I think people are just starting to understand how powerful an idea it is, because, you know, I'd love for you to talk about what the data economy is, or what you mean by that, because I think there's this growing awareness that, you know, from a kind of a macro world level to, you know, industry sector levels to the government and institutions, cities, right down to the individual. All of these different entities are pumping out all this data, right? But it's only recently that we have the tools to collect and analyze that data. But you know, there's potentially huge learnings and breakthroughs that can come from that data. But you know, we need to have the tools and resources to sort them in a fair and equitable fashion. And I think that is kind of the big problem. And I suppose that's the solution that you're working to. But yeah, talk to me. What's the data economy?
So the data economy it exists already. The problem is that there's already gatekeepers unintentionally. You have the internet platforms mainly in the US, but also in China. You have Tencent, Alibaba, and I can't remember the third one, Baidu, I think it is. And then you have the FAANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. But then you also have other aggregators like Bloomberg and Reuters, and there's a whole Axiom. There's a lot of people that sell data. It's just that nobody knows about it. No, you know, like nobody normal who in their daily life understands that. They understand that Facebook sells their data. They understand that Google sells their data. And we have a visceral, feeling about this, that this isn't necessarily right. And the data economy is growing very fast. So it's not just that people are collecting data, it's the storage. So something like Filecoin fits into the data economy as well. You have the analytics tools, which already is several $100 billion a year. So all the analytics tools. So companies are now seeing that the FAANG are analyzing all this data, and they're buying the similar tools that these companies have had for probably 5 or 7 years already, and now they're getting into this. You have, for instance, I heard Daimler has hired something like 5,000 data scientists to power their Mercedes Me, their digital, like electrified driving and all that sort of stuff. That's a massive amount of hiring in a space that actually isn't growing that fast, to take advantage of new product lines. Daimler is actually starting building new business lines, etc., on top of this. And so the data economy is any economic value that can be created by the use of data and data systems and software. This stuff is all around us. It's worth trillions, we believe. We believe that it is, because data can be used multiple times also, by the way. So one person uses that data, it can get better. Another person uses that, and then another and another. So you can use data like 10 or 15 times and it can get better over time. So we believe that the data economy is potentially as valuable as land, because it's non-rival. And the term non-rival means that if I'm sitting on a piece of land and I put a building on it, nobody else can put a building on that. With data, if you can aggregate that and you can sort it, you can put money on it and stuff like that, you can actually use it in 20 different ways for 20 different purposes, and it never loses its value. And so that's why we believe that as the world goes more digital, the potential for us in this frontier to turn this data into something truly valuable is immense. When you look at the world, everybody kind of knows the space. The land is owned by everybody, whether it's private individuals, companies, or governments. And it's a world that we see and we understand. The digital world is completely new, and we know that this is a new frontier. The virtual worlds, the NFTs, data, these are all places where there's potential for people to make a difference, for us to set kind of a new way, maybe not a new way, but a more equitable way for the value to be shared amongst people. And there will be new internet platforms that arise from the data economy, but if we can make it so everybody has some power, I'm hopeful that that we can build kind of the framework in a meaningful way.
Look, I understand that you guys at Ocean, you've just released, or you're about to release version 3 of Ocean. So I want to dive into some of that. But just before we do that, because you talked about Daimler hiring 5,000 data scientists, and you can kind of understand that. I guess one of the motivations there is they're probably recognizing that they need to build all these electric self-driving cars to try and compete with Tesla, because you can imagine I think the self-driving cars is such a good example of how data can be used, and the kind of advantage that a company like Tesla has, because they kind of recognized and got onto that early, right?
Absolutely. I think that the automotive companies need at a base level that every autonomous car is safe. No company wins unless all company wins who are still surviving, I guess, right? Everybody needs to think that a Tesla is safe. They might be the first to get over that line. But if there's other autonomous cars on the road and they're at a lower level, people aren't going to feel safe. So if every car has a base level of safety, then you're going to have better adoption. But by getting to that level first and then being able to share certain data so others can get to that level, doesn't mean Tesla has to wait for everybody, obviously. They can still continue to run forward. And there's so much potential for us in mobility. It's such a huge industry. And us being in the car, driving is probably one of the worst uses of our time when we are moving from A to B. So if we can be working, if we could be entertained, if we can do other things while we're in the car, I think that companies like Mercedes-Benz and Tesla are going to find out how we can optimize our space in a vehicle when we need to move from A to B.
Yes, indeed. I completely agree. And it's just, data is kind of, it's a cliche to say that data is the new oil, but it's true because data just is it's the fuel or the oil or the missing link that does connect all of these industries. And that's particularly true in the technology sectors. But, well, I mentioned Ocean Protocol version 3. So I guess, Bruce, it would be good maybe if you could just start to paint a picture of the Ocean Protocol ecosystem and how the different components work together to try and build out the data economy. And maybe we can talk through a couple of use cases and things like that. So, yeah, version 3, what does that mean?
Sure. Version 3, obviously, we've had version 1 and version 2. Version 3 is the learning from the previous versions plus all the beta and alpha versions that we've had before. We started out by building a relatively heavy architecture that had all the pieces that we could consider to build out something that the vision of Ocean. And what we found was, so we had our own proof of authority network. We had a whole bunch of different components, some of them to a certain part centralized or had to be run by centralized kind of servers and such like that, just to make the system work. And since we've been working this on since 2017, a lot has happened in the space. We have a lot of non-custodial wallets. We have automated market makers. We have governance mechanisms. We have also L2 chains, like chains that run on top of Ethereum or run on EVMs that are more efficient, that cost less, that are faster, these types of things. We've also had ERC20, ERC721, ERC998. So these are tokens like the tokens that everybody uses for standard issuance of tokens. You have non-fungible tokens at 721, and then you have composable tokens at 998. So these are the new building blocks that have shown up since 2017. So the architecture that we had designed early on, a lot of that we can simplify because the entire space is moving so fast. So V3 is the culmination of all of this. It's a culmination of our learnings, and it integrates with the current state of the art. And what is that? It means that we can, with Ocean V3, with a very lightweight model, integrate with the current Web3 infrastructure. We can make the full use of automated market makers like Balancer and Uniswap to create something what we call data tokens. We had always talked about securitizing data, turning it into a data stream, etc., or sorry, a value stream, turning data streams into value streams. But at the time that we started, that was an idea that we thought was going to be possible. In 2 short years, it's happened. We now have the ability to create ERC20 tokens, to use Ocean technology to make that available. So if I buy a data token, I can access that data stream. Not only that, I can actually trade these data tokens in a DEX. So I could use Balancer to input Ocean, and what I get out is one data token or 10 data tokens. I can use that data token to access the data, and there, as an AI researcher, I'm very happy. But at the same time, I could also speculate on it. I could be a trader. I could look at this from a perspective of holding a basket of these data streams as a mutual fund, let's just say. Yeah, you can create your own index fund of, let's say, various types of data in the automotive sector, various types of data in the healthcare sector. And you can actually compose a whole bunch of kind of investment products for yourself or for others even. So Ocean enables this. It is essentially a lightweight way that incorporates the access control of V1 and V2 with compute to data in the lightest weight format possible in this state of the art. And that's, I don't know if I explained that properly, but it's essentially a way for the data economy to integrate in with the financial system. I guess it probably helps for me to identify one of the 2 main problems that we've seen from the very start for 7 years since we come into the blockchain space. Number one, data isn't shared because people are scared of losing control. They're scared of losing privacy, and they're scared of not letting the data get into the hands of people that they don't want to. Ocean solves that for, like, Ocean V1 solved that. It was access control on your data so that you could define, if I publish this data, I can control and I can define who accesses it and how they access it. The second main problem why people weren't sharing data is there's no signal on price. Even if you share the data, typically you share it for free, or you say, well, you throw a number out against the wall and you say it's worth $500. Whether somebody pays it or not, that's a different thing, because on the other side, if I'm trying to buy data, I don't know if that data is worth $500. I have no idea. And what today's AMMs do from the DEXs, the automated market makers, is they allow for a certain liquidity in trading of tokens. And if you can instantiate kind of the data concept or that data stream into a data token, what you're able to do is get essentially liquidity on the value of that data token, which stands for the value of the data, because one data token equals access to that data set. And that solves the problem that we had been asked the entire time. Well, how do you price data? And there's no way that we as humans can just say this is the specific price of data and sort it in that way. We have to let the market do it. There has to be certain market information, and AMMs solve that problem for us. So we had two problems. We had I'm scared to lose control, and even if I share my data, I don't know the price. The DeFi system, the DeFi world, has solved the price problem, and we solved the access control. We combined it, and that is V3. So we hope that this is kind of the building block that allows data economy to grow, starting from the Web3 DeFi world and out into the broader community.
Fascinating, Bruce. I'd love for you to maybe talk about who, maybe use a couple of examples of who the target users then would be of Ocean Protocol. So, for example, I understand the example you used of, and it's fascinating. You could potentially create some kind of index fund of different data sources on Balancer, and of course, I understand the speculator or trader market, but what about, is there an individual use case down at the individual level? Because I can understand if you're a big company or some kind of entity with a large amount of data that you want to somehow trade or monetize or hedge or whatever it is, but does that work at the individual level as well?
It can. I've thought, we as a team have thought this through a little bit, and we think that there's certain phases. So there's two ways that I can talk about this. Number one is kind of the landscape of users or the landscape of targets we have. And then the second kind of perspective we can talk about is the phasing. Who's going to adopt this first? So I'll start with the landscape, if that kind of helps the audience with context. So we have developers who can use Ocean. So just to get to the core of Ocean, the smart contracts that we deploy are permissionless. They're out there. They're going to be on the Ethereum network. They're probably going to be on other networks, like, for instance, Polkadot or XDAI and a couple other ones. When they're out there, anybody can take that contract, say, here's the data that I publish. It's now kind of governed by the smart contract, and we have zero control over that smart contract. They're out there and live. So it's completely permissionless. And so we hope that is also, that gives people confidence. You can inspect the code, all that sort of stuff. So the first group that we are looking at is developers. If we can get developers to explore what this frontier data economy looks like and build applications, tools, things that link to consumers' needs, link to enterprise needs, that is kind of what's going to bring new energy into the system. We have already quite a few enterprise engagements, and we have actually more demand than we can handle, but that's a different area. So finance, automotive, healthcare, we're working with them and trying to get them up to speed and make it so that we can hand them over to service integrator partners, the Accentures, the KPMGs, the PwCs of the world, so they can work with these companies, because these companies are way too big and we want to stick at the protocol level. So those are the first two. You have the users who are going to try to make something personal or see how this data economy relates to them. So that's a third group. and this is kind of, I think, what you're referring to. We're trying to figure out how to make it work this way, but it could be individual users, for instance, posting their DNA. Not necessarily something that has a lot of infrastructure around it to make use of that, but this is one way that people could try it. We already see people, for instance, in the NFT world, selling their personal coins, selling their artwork through their personal coins, all that sort of stuff. That's an interesting use case. And we need this type of experimentation from the user side in collaborating with developers. And then the fourth side we have, of course, is people who are crypto natives who are speculating, but also kind of playing with this stuff themselves. And so if you can have people who have a profile of being a developer but crypto native, but also want to use it, that's kind of the perfect avatar that we're looking for. So developer, enterprise, user, and then finally crypto native. So that's kind of the landscape that we're looking at. And so we have to do something in all four directions to bring these stakeholder groups in to Ocean and show them a value proposition that makes sense.
Very nice, Bruce. It sounds like the rise of DeFi this year has really unlocked a whole host of new possibilities for Ocean protocol. So, for example, I can see in the Ocean literature you refer to data Lego, right, which is a kind of a riff on money Lego from DeFi, and also using the term initial data offering. So maybe just quickly speak to what you're kind of talking about there.
Absolutely. So data Legos is essentially taking the concepts that people are familiar with that are tried and tested from the finance world and applying them to data. I think that that's something that everybody can understand because we know that data is valuable. Everybody says data is valuable. We just never had the tools that work. We don't have the system or the model that we've been able to apply to data and to value it. And that's where data Legos come in, so that developers, in conjunction with Ocean, plus the DeFi world, and the emerging standards on how we do composability, how we do NFTs, etc., and tokens, how we are able to take all these different pieces and have an explosion of innovation in terms of this economy, because we don't have all the answers. We had this initial idea and this concept, and as you've kind of heard throughout this podcast, we've been feeling our way through. We've had an inkling of the direction where it's going. We've built towards it, and luckily the space has kind of met us with different tools that we could use to simplify things for everybody. And so we think that that's going to continue. The thing with data Legos is that these are all kind of built components, and they're not theoretical anymore. Back at the start, we had components like Filecoin, which it was in development for 3 or 4 years. We had Ocean, which was in development for 3 or 4 years. We had a whole bunch of things like Uniswap and Balancer that was kind of in the shadows until they reached kind of an awareness of people that it's both a balancer, a rebalancer, it's a market maker, it's also potentially somewhere you can trade with. It's a fantastic tool that has multiple purposes. So all these different data Legos are going to come together, and we're going to apply them to NFTs. We're going to apply them to reputation, identity, as well as now for the Ocean data economy. And then what happens when you apply those tools is that certain data sets people are just going to acknowledge as being very liquid and very valuable. So let's just say something that's on a global basis would be atmospheric data. If we have atmospheric temperature data that anybody can access, where people are incentivized to make it fresher, to keep updating the information, to provide data in places that are more remote so we can have kind of a complete view, we can get a handle on the atmospheric temperature and atmospheric conditions for climate researchers to start to, I guess, get a better idea of how global warming is affecting us. What happens if you IDO'd world climate data? Imagine this. Imagine releasing a token called Climate Token, and you earn Climate Token for making the data better. So you're incentivized to add better data, because if your data is used, it shows that there's a certain quality signal, and then you earn tokens. And what happens if we create an economic system that does not exist today from out of the air, where people are then incentivized to clean up the air? What happens if we had a carbon token where people are able to do this. And this is all reliant on data. So you had a carbon token where if you can take out carbon out of the air, but also bring data into the system so that people can find out ways to take out more carbon, you'd be able to earn this carbon token. So there's, once again, what I found is that we came in way early in the space on the bleeding edge before other stuff. And so we already see that this is kind of the direction that could be, and this is where we'd like to work on. So that's how data Legos, IDOs all work together, is that we're going to use the current system of the financial world, and we're going to work on things that matter to the world, which is climate change, global poverty, global health. These types of things matter. And of course, people can make money off of it.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating again, Bruce. And a lot of this stuff, you know, I love it because it's really, it's a combination of, you know, crypto, blockchain and sci-fi and futurism, really. And, you know, you talk about being on the bleeding edge, and I love the fact that you kind of admit that you don't have all the answers, and nobody could, because everything is so early. And when you are on the bleeding technology edge, you know, you're going to have some false starts and new things happen, but everything really is accelerating around us. And, you know, talking about sci-fi, and, you know, your co-founder, Trent McConaughey, how's Trent doing?
Trent is great.
The reason I ask is Trent came on the podcast with me back in March of this year, and he, you know, he was booked, if you like, to come on and talk about Ocean Protocol. But, you know, this is March, so I think we booked it in January or February, and then of course, you know, the world was flipped upside down as COVID hit. And I'm sure you obviously know Trent much better than I do, but Trent was, you know, quite worried about what was going to happen, and was, you know, he'd put together some data modeling, because he's, you know, he's a data guy, as are you, of course. And so when he came on the Crypto Conversation podcast with me, we didn't talk about Ocean at all, because, you know, he was very concerned about what was happening with COVID and wanted to help get the message out. So, but I listened to that podcast again just recently, and it's quite eerie. You can really hear the kind of, you know, Trent and I, we sound scared. You can hear it in our voices, because we could both see that, you know, this freight train was coming down the pipe, and most of the world wasn't really prepared for it at the time. Absolutely.
I was in Asia in December, January at the beginning of this year. And the first article I read about COVID was January 2nd. The second was January 4th. So I had kind of an inkling about this. It set off alarm bells in my head when I read about it because of the way that they had written the article. It actually turned out, I think it was CNBC who wrote about it, one of the very first, and I think Reuters was the second, and about this mysterious flu in China. And the next ones that I heard was something like January 8th, 12th, 16th. So I actually tracked kind of how this is happening. And by January about 16, I said, this is going to be bad. So we made plans to leave Asia as quick as possible. And we came back in late January about this. And everything that we know now about the virus, China already knew at the end of January. The fact that it's aerosolized, the fact that it can travel through plumbing, it stays inside the room in the ventilation, it causes neurological problems like brain encephalopathy. It attacks your heart, your lungs, your organs. All this stuff the Chinese knew. We just didn't listen to it. We had a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and such like that. People didn't want to believe it. But with any novel or new virus, the data is out there, actually. That's why, you know, when you look at reality, the data is out there. It's always out there. And China felt it the first. They were sharing it. Everybody needed to experience it themselves. So yes, we were scared. We had essentially prepared most of our company in the month of February before all the lockdowns happened. And by March, by late February, we were already remote only. So as a company, we were able to put people into positions where they were safe. Many of them went home to their home countries, and so they could spend time with their family and be with that. And so I'm happy with the response. We've been able to get focus in that time. And Trent has just been powering away. He's been the one who's been driving V3 from our side, and the result is coming up. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, Bruce, I think that's a nice place for us just to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off on a lighter note. We'll have some fun with the Crypto Conversation Hot Take Round.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Bruce Pon. Bruce is the co-founder of Ocean Protocol. Ocean, of course, are building out the new data economy. And Bruce, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Excellent. I just want you to hot takes, your hot fire, take your best shot. Here we go. Bruce, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
I'm multi-coin.
Bruce, what would you say is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
That this technology in 30 years is going to change the world, as we know, just like the internet has.
Fantastic. I don't doubt that for a second. All right, I ask every guest this question, and to be honest, I'll be glad when I don't have to ask it any longer. But who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020?
I've always, let me answer it this way. I've always found that Americans are very generous, and I really hope that they make a decision that's best for their country.
Very diplomatically answered, Bruce. I love it, and I have to agree. All right, let's keep it moving. Bill Gates. Bruce, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. Anything you like. What is blockchain, crypto, or the data economy? What does it look like in 10 years' time?
In 10 years, we're already going to have probably a couple $100 billion companies built on top of crypto. Crypto itself will still be decentralized, but companies like, for instance, Coinbase, Binance, there's a couple of data companies, probably NFT companies that are probably going to be worth billions, similar to the size of the internet. It's going to happen much faster and on a much larger scale, because from the very start, blockchain has been global, whereas the internet started in San Francisco. Fantastic.
I love it. Very bullish. All right. Well, on a kind of similar note, Bruce, William Gibson, a famous sci-fi author, he said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. It's a famous quote. You will have heard of it. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what's been happening in the last few months in the NFT space, where people are releasing digital goods. It's being sold for tens of thousands of dollars. There is an economy that's being set up. People have personal tokens for them. We've already in 1996, I had been speaking about people monetizing their education. People who are very talented and not able to get an education. That's happening now. People are actually doing things like this, where they're getting a personal token to fund their work, to add value to kind of their latent potential, and people are going to benefit from that. So I believe that's already here, and it will spread much more broadly to many facets, where we can get the value out of humans for themselves in a much fairer way.
Excellent. Very nicely said, Bruce. I like it a lot. Okay, well, it's time to get weird. Let's zoom out. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race, Bruce? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think it'll be both. You're going to have aspects which are going to be uncomfortable. Like, for instance, the current pace of climate change is not necessarily something we're going to be comfortable with for a while. So certain parts of the world are going to be uninhabitable for a while. But at the same time, I see technology moving forward quickly enough that we can solve some of these problems, or at least start to solve these problems over the long term. Whether us as humanity can maintain the discipline over the long term to do it, that's a different question. But I think that the technology is there and will be there to decarbonize, to help us implement something like UBI, universal healthcare, all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of people who are still uncomfortable waiting for the powers that be to help make the society more equitable and give opportunity for everybody.
Very nuanced answer there, Bruce. I like it a lot and I tend to agree, but I think we'll move on to the final question, which is, Bruce, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
Nowadays, I'm looking at, I think a lot about Blade. I think about how a lot of that world is starting to happen, but I also think about Star Trek. I mean, everybody knows Star Trek. The universal, I forget what it's called. It's I think it starts with C, but it's you know, they walk up to this vending machine and then they say, I'll have a hot chocolate or I'll have a Scotch rum. Yes. And then it comes out, you know, and you always wondered, how did they pay for that? Well, in my mind, that's Bitcoin. They had some sort of NFC chip. The device knew that these people were coming up. They ordered something and they paid by Bitcoin or something similar. The universal, this vending machine. I mean, all these things. Star Trek is fantastic, but I also think about Blade, where it was a little bit dystopian, obviously.
Do you mean Blade Runner?
Yeah, Blade Runner, yes.
Yeah, and look, I agree on Star Trek, and Star Trek has been it's a popular choice. That's probably the most common answer here on the Crypto Conversation when we ask that. Bruce, been a lot of fun talking to you today. There's not really anything else to say except to hand the microphone back to you. And look, welcome. Please give your closing thoughts on the Ocean Protocol. Tell the people what they need to know about Ocean and where they can go to find out more, and perhaps where they can find you on your various platforms.
Sure. Everybody can go to oceanprotocol.com. We think that it is a core piece of the emerging data economy. If it's something that interests you as a developer, we're building up our documentation and our outreach so that we can work with you. And for everybody else, enterprises, individuals, please stay up to date in terms of Ocean, because some of our smart contracts and tooling and stuff, it could help you start your new business in the future, or protect your data if you want to share it.
Fantastic. And just while we're talking, Bruce, so it was the replicator in Star Trek. The replicator was a machine that could create and recycle and synthesize meals on demand. The replicator.
Oh, fantastic.
All right. I think that's a nice place to finish. Thank you very much, Bruce. All the best. And say hi to Trent for me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.